Beware of practicing your righteousness before others in order to be seen by them, otherwise you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Matthew 6 verse 1. We can divide into 4 distinct categories the ministry of those called by God throughout the history of salvation. The decisive criterion for this choice could be none other than the frame of reference that sets the limits of the equation proposed by the title of this message. It would be stating the obvious to claim that the biblical prophets were the human beings who came closest to an intimate relationship with God, a relationship that did not always occur by their own will, but always by the irrevocable will of God. It was not by mere chance that their prophecies have remained irreproachable in relevance and legitimacy. For this reason, they have passed unscathed through the scrutiny of multiple oral transmissions and countless compilations. It is, at the very least, strange to observe that some of them made frequent use of words and attitudes so incompatible with evangelical morality that we would hardly consider them appropriate for what we call sacred text. Acts such as that of Isaiah, who walked naked for 3 years, and words such as those of Ezekiel, who referred to women as cows. Yet their prophetic message is of astonishing precision, both for their immediate context and for any situation or era. The forcefulness of their words shook the foundations of the most powerful empires, brought down the most imposing dynasties, and deprived the most dominant tyrants of their sleep. Lives of unconditional surrender and, consequently, of extreme torment, as the letter to the Hebrews so aptly describes, they suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, sawn in two, tempted, put to death by the sword. They went about dressed in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated, men of whom the world was not worthy. And all of this with a discouraging aggravation: none of them received what had been promised. But there was another time, already in the Christian era, when servants of God detached themselves from their lives, some of them quite prosperous, and from their daily obligations in order to live out the fullness of the gospel among the poor and the destitute. These, whom today we quite rightly call saints, would have fiercely rebelled against those who proposed and carried out their canonizations. Today they are celebrated and honored. In the past, however, they were also marginalized, persecuted, and killed because of the message they preached through their way of life. Their character and availability for service were recognized by only a few. Among these were none of those who held power in the church they served. We must also consider the post-Reformation pastors, men who lived lives of deprivation and sacrifice in obedience to the inaudible call of the gospel. It was rare to find one who received a stipend equal to or greater than the average salary of the members of his congregation. Many had higher academic training and abilities that would have made them successful in any other profession they might have chosen. By personal choice, they condemned their wives and children to a Spartan life of very limited resources and to exhausting, repeated transfers from parish to parish. And yet tradition does not allow us to call them saints. They lie completely forgotten in the cellars of church history. At best, their faces appear in crude frames. Nevertheless, the divine call, for our benefit, kindled in them an inexplicable love for the church, which enabled them to overcome every downfall, simply for a cause to which they remained faithful despite all adversity. If we do not grant the ancient prophets the recognition of saints, and if we are not permitted to bestow upon the saints the honor that the author of the letter to the Hebrews accords them, then we are no longer worthy of the heroism they bequeath to us. Much less are we worthy of the monumental churches, the renowned centers of learning, and the charitable works that far surpass, by a wide margin, any initiative of any secular government. All this insane lack of discernment has led us to the fourth category of the called, that of the irreproachable and untouchable anointed of the Lord. Pastors, bishops, missionaries, and apostles who have not only accumulated fortunes, but also wield a tyrannical power above good and evil. They are credited with a special anointing and a distinctive intimacy with God that sets them apart from the members of their churches and even elevates them above the ancient servants of God who wrote the history of salvation with their own blood. Many will say that we have no way to establish standards of faithfulness and conduct in comparison with past eras, because we are living in the end times. But the reality is another. We too are not worthy of the men and women of whom the world was never worthy. To grasp this contrast, let us recall the story of a certain bishop who, in the middle of the last century, traveled by train to visit a church in the countryside. The town prepared for his arrival with a brass band and all the fanfare. Everyone waited for him at the first-class platform. After the passengers disembarked, they realized that the bishop was not among them. Looking toward the end of the train, in third class, they saw him dragging his heavy suitcase. Some time later, a reporter said to him, "The pastors and bishops of today are not like those of the past. They stay in 5-star hotels and travel first class by airplane." The old bishop replied, "But they are not received with a brass band."
Are you interested in controversial biblical topics? Then this is your channel. Explore it more deeply. We have videos that may surprise you. And if this message was a blessing to you, like, comment, subscribe, and share.